In this video we're going to look at drugs for malaria. So malaria, of course, is a big problem throughout the world. We don't notice it so much in our country, but around the world it's a major debilitating disease. So let's try and look at the drugs which are currently in existence in an attempt to understand how they work. So one way of looking at it is in terms of this life cycle here, and what you can see is the process starts with the malaria feeding from your blood, and then it injects as a byproduct these parasites, the plasmodium. The first thing the parasite does is within 30 minutes it disappears from the bloodstream and enters the hepatocytes in the liver. So it goes into the liver cells, and there it starts reproducing and produces these little creatures here called merozoites. These eventually rupture the liver cell and are released into the bloodstream and then are taken up into red blood cells, erythrocytes. And because they're hidden in the red blood cells, they're kind of safe out of the way from a lot of drugs. And then when they're in the red blood cells, what they do is they hijack the red blood cell. They change which genes are expressed, and they change it so that they basically produce a specialized cell, and they then have within themselves this food vacuole. And what they do is they take up the hemoglobin, put it into the food vacuole, and then here what they do is they break up the hemoglobin to produce, let's draw this down here a little bit more. So let's take this food vacuole here. So they break down the hemoglobin into amino acids and heme. And heme is a bit of a problem because it's toxic, so it has to get rid of it. And the way it does it is to polymerize it into this polymer called hemozoin. So if we can stop this from happening, we can kill the parasite. So with that in mind, let's have a look now at the different sites of action of various drugs. So let's just get rid of all these. Don't need all this now. So in short, drugs used for prophylaxis, that is to prevent malaria. So when you go on holiday and they tell you that you should take these drugs to stop you getting malaria, these usually operate at this stage here. Other drugs, such as those used to control the acute phase, so prophylaxis then is aimed at preventing the release of the merozoites. At the acute phase, So that's when malaria actually breaks out and they give you something for it. These act at this site here during the erythrocyte phase, but before the release of the trophozoates. And then finally, well, not quite finally, but two more, which is drugs used to prevent actual transmission. These target, let's move our picture down a bit. So drugs that prevent transmission stop the formation of the zygote. Finally, there's another class, and these are probably some of the most powerful ones, and they're called the radical drugs, or the radical cure drugs. And these actually operate, where can I draw this? Okay, radical cure. Why are they called that? Well, they operate actually within the hepatocytes. And that's important because most of these other ones actually don't really cure them. So how can I put it? So this does not a cure, because all it does is keeps it under control. Only the radical cure ones get inside the liver, because all these other drugs, they stop the parasite from expanding within the body, if you like. But of course, you've still got this reserve here of parasites, and they'll always break out. And they're quite happy and safe because they're inside the liver cell, so they're quite out of the way. And only the radical cure drugs actually get there. So let's have a look at some of the drugs which affect these various aspects. So let's start with a few you might have heard of already. We're going to focus in here, and you've probably heard of chloroquine. Spell it right. And quinine. And what they do is to do exactly this. They break the formation of the heme polymer. So then heme builds up, and that results in the death of the cell. There are also some new ones, such as artemisinin, which was actually from the Chinese herbal remedy, and that is one of the new drugs, and that also affects the hemoglobin digestion, but it's not quite clear how it does that. But there are other things you can do as well. For example, you can, just as with bacteria, inhibit folate. So the malaria parasite, just like us, needs to use folate to convert folate into dihydrofolate. Sorry, not dihydrofolate, it's tetrahydrofolate, which then is used to make the purines that you need to make DNA. And drugs such as proguanil act to prevent the synthesis of tetrahydrofolate. So they're interfering with the folate pathway just like antibacterials. So that's a summary of the current drugs used to treat malaria.